Welcome to our channel, where history's shadows whisper their darkest secrets. Tonight, we uncover one of America's most chilling frontier mysteries, the cursed legacy of the Hollowmere family. Deep in the misty hills of Kentucky, 1850, stood Hollow Estate, a grand farmhouse crouched beneath ancient oaks and jagged limestone cliffs. By day, it was the picture of southern prosperity. By night, its silhouette loomed like a haunted memory. For 3 generations, the Hollow's tobacco fields thrived unnaturally. Fed, some said, not just by sweat and soil, but by something far more sinister. Because behind their wealth lay whispers of sacrifice, secrets, and a darkness that refused to die. Our story begins on a bitter January morning. Frost clung to the window panes of Hollow Estate, and inside, the family patriarch, Thaddeus Hollow, lay dying in his 4-poster bed. At 68 years of age, Thaddeus had outlived 2 wives and built an empire from nothing but determination, and what some locals whispered was an unholy bargain. His son, Elijah, stood at the bedroom doorway, watching as his father's chest rose and fell with increasing difficulty. Elijah was a stern man of 43, his face weathered from years overseeing the tobacco fields. Beside him stood his wife, Margaret, clutching her Bible so tightly her knuckles had turned white. "He's passing," Elijah murmured, his voice devoid of emotion. Margaret crossed herself. "May God have mercy on his soul." Their 3 children, William, aged 18, Charlotte, 15, and young Thomas, just 10, were forbidden from entering the room. Death was not for young eyes to witness, especially in a house where death had always carried strange circumstances. The family physician, Dr. James Montgomery, emerged from the bedroom, closing the door softly behind him. "It won't be long now," he said, wiping his hands on a cloth. "The pneumonia has taken hold of his lungs. I've done all I can." Margaret nodded solemnly. "Thank you, doctor. Will you attend to the arrangements afterward?" Dr. Montgomery's eyes darted away, unable to meet Margaret's gaze. Everyone in Cumberland County knew about the peculiar condition that befell the Hollow dead. It had been that way since the first Hollow, Ezekiel, had settled these lands in 1798. "Of course," the doctor replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll perform the necessary procedures." The necessary procedures. Such a clinical way to describe what would happen. When a Hollow died, their eyes, always their eyes, would be found missing. Not gouged out, not violently removed, but simply absent, as though they had never existed at all. The sockets smooth, the skin unbroken. No medical explanation had ever been offered, and no Hollow had ever discussed it outside the family. In the parlor, young Thomas sat by the fire, whittling a piece of pine with a small pocket knife his father had given him on his last birthday. William paced nervously, his tall frame casting dancing shadows on the floral wallpaper. Charlotte remained perfectly still in the window seat, her needlepoint forgotten in her lap as she stared out at the barren winter landscape. "He's going to die tonight, isn't he?" Thomas asked, his childish voice breaking the heavy silence. William stopped pacing. "Hold your tongue, Thomas. It's disrespectful to speak of such things." "But it's true," Charlotte said quietly. "And you know what happens when a Hollow dies." The siblings exchanged knowing glances. Though never explicitly told, they had pieced together the family's secret through whispers, through the careful handling of the dead, through the closed casket funerals that were mandatory for all Hollows. "Grandfather told me once," William said, lowering his voice, "that it's the price our family pays for our prosperity." "Price for what?" Thomas asked, setting down his whittling. "Hush now," Charlotte cautioned, glancing toward the hallway. "Father would tan your hide if he heard such talk." Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the eaves of the old house. The lanterns flickered, sending shadows dancing across the walls. In the distance, a wolf howled, an eerie sound that made Thomas shiver despite the warmth of the fire. As midnight approached, a terrible rattling cough echoed through the house, followed by a silence so profound it seemed to have weight. The children knew without being told. Thaddeus Hollow had breathed his last. What followed was a flurry of hushed activity. Elijah and Dr. Montgomery remained in the bedroom for nearly an hour before the doctor emerged, carrying his black medical bag, now slightly fuller than before. Margaret instructed the housekeeper, Mrs. Simmons, to prepare the parlor for the wake, while the stable boy was sent to town to inform the undertaker. No one spoke of the strange ritual that had just occurred behind the bedroom door. No one mentioned the small wooden box that Dr. Montgomery carried out, locked with a brass key that he handed solemnly to Elijah, the same kind of box that accompanied every hollow death. The following evening, as Thaddeus lay in his casket in the parlor, the first of the neighbors began to arrive to pay their respects. The casket was, of course, only open from the waist down, the upper portion sealed beneath polished mahogany. The official explanation was always the same. The deceased had suffered facial disfigurement in their final illness, too distressing for public view. Most accepted this explanation without question. But there were always whispers, rumors that slithered through Cumberland County like morning mist through the hollows. Among those who came to the wake was Solomon Carter, the elderly owner of the general store in nearby Millfield. As he offered his condolences to Elijah, his rheumy eyes kept darting to the half-closed casket. "A great man, your father," Solomon said, gripping Elijah's hand. "Truly built something from nothing, didn't he?" "Indeed," Elijah replied curtly. "We're grateful for your presence tonight, Mr. Carter." Solomon nodded, then leaned in closer. "I knew your grandfather, Ezekiel, was just a boy when he first came to these parts. Nothing but the clothes on his back and that strange little book he carried everywhere." Elijah stiffened. "I'm sure many reminiscences could be shared tonight, Mr. Carter, but perhaps this isn't the time." But Solomon was not so easily deterred. Strange how fate works. A penniless man arrives with nothing but an ancient book written in no language anyone could read. And within a year, he's growing the finest tobacco in the state. "Mr. Carter," Elijah interrupted, his voice low but firm, "I must attend to other guests. Please help yourself to refreshments in the dining room." As Solomon shuffled away, William approached his father. "What was he talking about? What book?" "Nothing of consequence," Elijah snapped. "Old men's tales. Nothing more. Go check on your mother." But William's curiosity had been piqued. The book Solomon mentioned, could it be connected to the family's strange affliction, to their prosperity, to the hushed conversations that stopped whenever the children entered a room? Later that night, after the last of the mourners had departed and the house had fallen silent, William lit a candle and made his way to his father's study. He knew he risked severe punishment if caught, but the need for answers outweighed his fear. The study was a masculine sanctuary, dominated by a massive oak desk and walls lined with leather-bound books. William had rarely been permitted inside, and never unsupervised. He moved carefully, holding his candle high, searching for anything unusual. At first, nothing seemed out of place. Agricultural ledgers, correspondence with tobacco buyers in Louisville and Cincinnati, records of slave purchases and sales, the mundane paperwork of a prosperous Kentucky plantation. Then, as he was about to give up, William noticed that one of the books on the shelf didn't quite match the others. It was smaller, its binding not leather, but something he couldn't identify. Something that seemed to absorb the candlelight rather than reflect it. With trembling fingers, he pulled it from the shelf. The cover bore no title, only a strange symbol that resembled an eye with a spiral where the pupil should be. When William touched it, he felt an odd sensation, as though the book were somehow alive, pulsing gently against his fingertips. He opened it and found pages filled with text in an unfamiliar script, curves and angles that hurt his eyes to look upon, interspersed with disturbing illustrations. One depicted a figure with hollow eye sockets standing amidst abundant crops. Another showed a similar figure placing what appeared to be eyes into a box buried beneath a tree. "William!" The voice startled him so badly he nearly dropped the book. Turning, he found his father standing in the doorway, face pale in the candlelight. "Father, Put it back." Elijah's voice was deadly quiet. "Put it back and get out." "What is this? Does it have something to do with what happens when we die?" With grandfather's eyes, Elijah crossed the room in 3 swift strides and snatched the book from William's hands. Some knowledge is not meant for you. Not yet. Then it's true. The rumors about our family, about a bargain. Elijah's hand struck William's face with such force that the young man staggered backward. Never speak of this. Never. Do you understand me? This is our burden to bear, and we bear it with dignity and silence. Go to bed, William. We bury your grandfather tomorrow, and I'll hear no more of this. William retreated, his cheek stinging, his mind racing. Whatever secret the Hollows harbored, his father was determined to keep it hidden. But now that William had seen the book, had felt its unnatural texture beneath his fingers, he knew he could not simply forget. The funeral the following day was a somber affair. Thaddeus Hollow was laid to rest in the family plot on a hill overlooking the estate, beneath the sprawling branches of an ancient oak tree, the same tree depicted in one of the illustrations in the strange book. As the mourners dispersed, returning to the house for a meal, William lingered by the fresh grave. From this vantage point, he could see the entirety of Hollow Estate. The main house, the tobacco barns, the slave quarters, the fields stretching to the horizon. All of it built on whatever bargain Ezekiel Hollow had struck all those years ago. You shouldn't be up here alone. William turned to find Charlotte standing behind him, her black mourning dress whipping around her ankles in the winter wind. I'm trying to understand, William said. Charlotte moved to stand beside him. Understand what? Our family, the missing eyes, the prosperity that never fails, even when other farms struggle. The way people in town look at us with fear, not just respect. Charlotte was silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the distant house. I've heard things, she finally said. When mother and father think I'm asleep, about a covenant made by our great-grandfather, about a price paid in sight. What kind of covenant? I don't know exactly, but last spring, when the Taylor farm was failing because of the drought, I overheard father telling mother that we needn't worry. He said, the covenant ensures our prosperity regardless of weather or blight. We bury your grandfather tomorrow, and I'll hear no more of this. William retreated, his cheek stinging, his mind racing. Whatever secret the Hollows harbored, his father was determined to keep it hidden. But now that William had seen the book, had felt its unnatural texture beneath his fingers, he knew he could not simply forget. The funeral the following day was a somber affair. Thaddeus Hollow was laid to rest in the family plot on a hill overlooking the estate, beneath the sprawling branches of an ancient oak tree, the same tree depicted in one of the illustrations in the strange book. As the mourners dispersed, returning to the house for a meal, William lingered by the fresh grave. From this vantage point, he could see the entirety of Hollow Estate. The main house, the tobacco barns, the slave quarters, the fields stretching to the horizon. All of it built on whatever bargain Ezekiel Hollow had struck all those years ago. You shouldn't be up here alone. William turned to find Charlotte standing behind him, her black mourning dress whipping around her ankles in the winter wind. I'm trying to understand, William said. Charlotte moved to stand beside him. Understand what? Our family, the missing eyes, the prosperity that never fails, even when other farms struggle. The way people in town look at us with fear, not just respect. Charlotte was silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the distant house. I've heard things, she finally said. When mother and father think I'm asleep, about a covenant made by our great-grandfather, about a price paid in sight. What kind of covenant? I don't know exactly, but last spring, when the Taylor farm was failing because of the drought, I overheard father telling mother that we needn't worry. He said, the covenant ensures our prosperity regardless of weather or blight. William frowned. And you think it's connected to what happens when we die? To our eyes? Charlotte shuddered. I found something once. When I was 12, I was playing in the root cellar, and I discovered a loose stone in the wall. Behind it was a small space containing a wooden box. I opened it, William. Inside were dozens of them, preserved somehow. Eyes all different colors. Some very old, shriveled like dried fruit. Others newer. William felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. Whose eyes? Our ancestors, I think. I recognized one pair. They were the same unusual amber color as Uncle Frederick's, who died when I was 7. But why? Why would father keep them? I don't know, but after I found them, I had nightmares for weeks. Dreams of eyes watching me from the darkness, of crops watered with tears, of a presence in the fields that hungered for sight. William was about to respond when he noticed a figure standing at the edge of the family plot. Solomon Carter, the old shopkeeper, watching them with an expression that mingled pity and fear. "Come," William said, taking his sister's arm. "We should return to the house." As they passed Solomon, the old man spoke softly. "Be careful, children. The bargain your great-grandfather made cannot be broken, but perhaps it can be understood. Knowledge is its own kind of sight." Before they could question him further, Solomon turned and made his way down the hill, leaning heavily on his walking stick. The days following Thaddeus's funeral brought a flurry of changes to Hollow Estate. Elijah, now the head of the family, threw himself into work with almost manic energy. He expanded the tobacco operation, purchasing adjoining land from struggling farmers, hiring more field hands, and commissioning the construction of a new curing barn. Margaret withdrew into quiet piety, spending hours in prayer in her bedroom. Charlotte took over many of the household duties, while Thomas, still too young to fully understand the family's secrets, continued with his lessons under the tutelage of Mr. Finch, the stern schoolmaster who visited 3 times weekly. William, however, could not return to his previous life. The glimpse of the book, combined with Charlotte's story of the preserved eyes, haunted him. He began to pay closer attention to the estate, to the rhythms of life and death that pulsed through Hollow Land. He noticed how the soil of their fields was darker, richer than that of neighboring farms, how their tobacco plants grew faster, stronger, with broader leaves of deeper green, how even the livestock, the horses, cattle, and hogs, seemed more vigorous, more fertile than those of other farmers. And he began to watch his father. Elijah had always been reserved, even stern, but now William detected something else beneath his father's composed exterior. A tension, a vigilance, as though he were constantly watching for something. Every evening, Elijah would walk the perimeter of the property alone, pausing at certain points to stand in silence, as if listening or waiting. One night in early March, as a late winter storm howled outside, William followed his father on one of these walks. Keeping to the shadows, he watched as Elijah made his way to the ancient oak tree atop the hill, where generations of hollows lay buried. To William's astonishment, his father knelt before the tree and began to dig with a small trowel he had carried concealed in his coat. After removing several shovelfuls of earth, Elijah reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object that gleamed in the moonlight, a glass vial containing a clear liquid. He unstoppered it and poured the contents into the hole, then carefully replaced the soil and packed it down. As Elijah stood and turned to leave, a sudden gust of wind nearly knocked William from his hiding place behind a neighboring headstone. He held his breath, certain he would be discovered, but his father seemed preoccupied, his gaze fixed on the dark line of trees that marked the boundary of Hollow Land. "Another year," Elijah murmured, words nearly lost in the wind. "The covenant holds." William waited until his father had descended the hill before approaching the oak tree. The disturbed earth was barely visible in the darkness, but he could smell something unusual, a sharp, medicinal odor with an underlying sweetness that reminded him of overripe fruit. The next morning, William rose early and returned to the family plot. In the gray light of dawn, he could see that the spot where his father had poured the liquid was already different. The soil darker, almost moist despite the freezing temperatures. As spring arrived, bringing with it the planting season, William's observations grew more troubling. The tobacco seedlings on Hollow Land emerged from the soil with unnatural speed, as if eager to reach the sunlight. While neighboring farmers struggled with late frosts and unpredictable weather, the hollow crops thrived. And there were other, more disturbing signs. Birds that flew over hollow fields sometimes dropped from the sky, their small bodies found with eyes missing. Stray dogs that wandered onto the property disappeared, only to be found days later at the edges of the woods, eyeless yet otherwise untouched. William confided his observations to Charlotte, who had begun having nightmares again. Dreams of eyes floating in darkness, watching her, judging her. "Something's feeding on them," she whispered one evening as they sat together on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the tobacco fields in shades of gold and crimson. "Something that gives prosperity in return." "But what? And why eyes specifically?" William asked. Charlotte shuddered. "Eyes are windows. That's what Reverend Blackwood always says in his sermons. Windows to the soul." "You think something is taking souls?" "I don't know, but I think whatever bargain great-grandfather made, it demands sight as payment. And not just our sight after death. It's taking from other living things, too." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Montgomery, who had come to check on Margaret. She had been suffering from headaches and periods of disorientation, ailments that the doctor attributed to grief, but that William now wondered might have another cause. As Dr. Montgomery was leaving, William approached him. "Doctor, may I speak with you privately?" The physician regarded him warily but nodded. They walked together toward the doctor's waiting carriage. "What troubles you, young man?" Dr. Montgomery asked. "I need to know about my family's condition, about what happens when we die." The doctor's face paled. "William, these are matters for your father to discuss with you, not me. But you're the one who deals with the aftermath. You're the one who takes the eyes." Dr. Montgomery glanced nervously toward the house. "Lower your voice, for God's sake. These are not things to be spoken of openly." "Then tell me privately, as a medical man, what explanation can you offer?" The doctor sighed, removing his spectacles to polish them with a handkerchief, a nervous gesture that William had noticed before. "Medically, none. There is no medical explanation for what happens to your family's eyes after death. The tissue simply vanishes. The socket remains unviolated, the eyelids intact. It defies all scientific understanding. And the eyes you remove, what becomes of them?" Dr. Montgomery replaced his spectacles, his hands trembling slightly. "I deliver them to your father, as I did with your grandfather, as my father did with your great-grandfather. What happens after that, I cannot say, but you must have theories." "Theories are dangerous things, William, especially in cases where science fails us. All I know is that your family has enjoyed remarkable prosperity for generations while paying a price that most would find unsettling." He climbed into his carriage. "If you value your safety and that of your siblings, you'll leave these matters alone." As the doctor drove away, William remained standing in the driveway, more determined than ever to uncover the truth. That night, he made a decision. He would find the book again, and if possible, the box of preserved eyes that Charlotte had discovered years earlier. Together, perhaps they would reveal the nature of the covenant that bound the Hollow family to their macabre fate. Waiting until the house was quiet, William took a candle and made his way to his father's study. To his frustration, he found the door locked, a new development since his previous intrusion. Undeterred, he moved on to the root cellar where Charlotte had found the box of eyes. The root cellar was a cool, earthy space beneath the house, accessed via a trapdoor in the kitchen floor. Stone steps led down into darkness that smelled of soil and stored vegetables. William descended carefully, his candle casting grotesque shadows on the rough walls. Charlotte had said the box was hidden behind a loose stone. William examined the walls methodically, pressing against each stone, looking for any sign of movement. After nearly an hour of searching, his fingers found what he was seeking. A stone that shifted slightly under pressure. With mounting excitement, he worked the stone free and reached into the cavity behind it. His fingers touched wood, smooth and cold. He pulled out a box about the size of a large book, its surface carved with the same spiral eye symbol he had seen on the mysterious tome in his father's study. William's heart pounded as he set down his candle and lifted the lid of the box. The hinges made no sound, as if recently oiled. Inside, nestled on black velvet, were dozens of eyes, just as Charlotte had described. They lay unnaturally preserved, neither dried nor decaying, their irises still vibrant with color: blue, brown, green, hazel, and the distinctive amber that had belonged to Uncle Frederick. But there was something else in the box, a folded piece of parchment tucked beneath the velvet lining. With trembling fingers, William extracted it and unfolded it carefully. The parchment was covered in the same strange script as the book, but at the bottom was a passage written in English, the ink faded but still legible. I, Ezekiel Hollow, being of sound mind, though desperate circumstance, do hereby enter into covenant with the entity that dwells beyond the veil of mortal sight. In exchange for prosperity unending, for crops that never fail, and wealth that never diminishes, I offer the sight of my line in perpetuity. Upon death, our eyes shall feed its hunger for witnessing the mortal realm. So long as this covenant remains unbroken, the hollow name shall flourish. Should any seek to defy this bargain, the entity shall claim all sight, not after death, but in life. This I swear on my soul and the souls of all who bear my name hereafter. Below this passage was a signature in what appeared to be blood, now brown with age, and beside it, pressed into the parchment, was the outline of an eye. William stared at the document in horror. His great-grandfather had traded the eyes of every hollow descendant for material prosperity. But what was this entity? And what did it mean by claiming sight in life rather than in death? A noise from above startled him, footsteps crossing the kitchen floor. Hastily, William folded the parchment and returned it to the box. He closed the lid and was about to replace the box in its hiding place when the trapdoor to the cellar flew open. Framed in the doorway, holding a lantern, was Elijah Hollow. "Father," William gasped. Elijah's face was a mask of cold fury as he descended the steps. "What have I told you about prying into matters that don't concern you?" "Don't concern me? This concerns all of us. You've been hiding the truth about our family's curse." "It's not a curse," Elijah snapped, snatching the box from William's hands. "It's a covenant, a bargain that has kept our family prosperous for generations." "A bargain with what? What is this entity mentioned in the document?" Elijah's expression flickered with surprise. "You read the covenant." "Yes, great-grandfather traded our eyes, our sight, for prosperity. But to whom? What kind of creature demands such a thing?" Elijah carefully returned the box to its hiding place and replaced the stone. When he turned back to William, his anger seemed to have hardened into resolve. "Come with me," he said. "It's time you understood what it means to be a hollow." Elijah led William out of the root cellar and through the sleeping house. They exited through the back door and walked in silence across the moonlit fields toward the tobacco barns. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamond dust. The air crisp with the promise of a late frost that would threaten other farms but somehow spare hollow land. "Our great-grandfather came to Kentucky with nothing," Elijah finally said as they walked. "He had been a failed merchant in Boston, then a failed farmer in Pennsylvania. By the time he reached these hills, he was desperate, starving. He had a wife and infant son, my grandfather, and winter was approaching. They reached the largest of the tobacco barns, a massive structure with vertical board siding that had weathered to a silvery gray. Elijah produced a key from his pocket and unlocked the heavy wooden door. What he also had, Elijah continued, swinging the door open, was a book, an ancient text he had acquired in Boston from a sailor who claimed to have found it in a temple in the Far East. The sailor said it contained secrets of agricultural prosperity, but warned that such knowledge came with a price. The interior of the barn was cavernous and dark, the familiar smell of cured tobacco hanging in the air. Elijah lit a lantern that hung by the door, illuminating the space with a warm golden glow. "Desperate men make desperate choices," Elijah said, moving toward the back of the barn, where a trapdoor was set into the packed earth floor. Ezekiel followed the instructions in the book. He performed a ritual at the full moon, offering his own blood and tears as initial payment, and the entity answered. "What entity?" William pressed. Elijah paused, his hand on the iron ring of the trapdoor. "We don't know its true nature. The book calls it by many names. The Watcher, the Hunger Beyond the Veil, the Eyeless One. It exists adjacent to our world, separated by a membrane as thin as an eyelid." He pulled open the trapdoor, revealing a set of rough-hewn steps descending into darkness. "It craves sight, William, the ability to witness our world, which it cannot do directly. In exchange for our eyes after death, a time when we no longer need them. It ensures that our land remains fertile, our crops abundant, our livestock healthy. Elijah descended the steps, motioning for William to follow. The younger man hesitated, then steeled himself and followed his father into the earth. The passage led to a small chamber carved from the limestone that underlay much of Kentucky. The walls were smooth, almost polished, and covered in the same strange symbols William had seen in the book. In the center of the chamber was a stone altar, and upon it sat the book itself, open to a page dominated by the spiral eye symbol. "Every full moon," Elijah explained, his voice echoing slightly in the underground space, "I come here to renew the covenant. I bring a vial containing the preserved essence of our ancestors' eyes, diluted with my own tears, and pour it into the soil beneath the oak tree where our family rests. This keeps the entity satisfied between deaths." "This is unholy," William whispered, backing toward the steps. "We should burn the book, break this covenant." Elijah's laugh was hollow. "And what do you think would happen then? Did you not read the terms? If the covenant is broken, the entity takes all sight, not after death, but in life. Every living hollow would be struck blind immediately. And not just blind, William. Our eyes would be claimed, harvested while we still breathe." William felt sick. "So we're trapped, forever bound to this thing." "We're blessed," Elijah corrected. "Look around you at the other farms in the county. How many have failed? How many families have lost everything to drought, blight, or pests? We have never known such hardship, even in the worst years. Hollow crops thrive at the cost of our eyes when we die, a small price to pay for generations of prosperity. We don't need our eyes in the grave, William, but our descendants need the security this covenant provides." William stared at his father, trying to reconcile the man he had always respected with this defender of an unholy pact. "And the birds, the stray dogs found without eyes, is that part of the covenant too?" Elijah's expression darkened. "The entity's hunger grows with time. When too many years pass between hollow deaths, it samples from other sources. But these are mere appetizers compared to what it truly craves. Human eyes that have witnessed generations of life. This has to end," William insisted. "We can't continue this bargain knowing what we know." "It will end when the last hollow dies," Elijah said coldly. "Until then, we honor the covenant as we have for 3 generations. And now that you know the truth, you will help me maintain it." "No," William shook his head vehemently. "I want no part of this. You have no choice. You are a hollow. The covenant binds you whether you wish it or not." Before William could respond, a scream echoed from above, high-pitched and terrified. Charlotte's voice. Both men froze, then scrambled for the steps. They emerged from the underground chamber to find the barn door open, swinging in a sudden wind that had not been present minutes before. Without speaking, they ran toward the house, fear driving them faster than they had ever moved. As they approached, William could see that lights had been lit throughout the house. More screams came from inside, not just Charlotte's now, but Thomas's as well, and the deeper voice of Mr. Finch calling for help. They burst through the back door to find chaos. Servants ran through the hallways, some carrying lanterns, others simply fleeing in terror. From upstairs came the sound of breaking glass and what seemed like hundreds of wings beating against the walls. "Margaret!" Elijah shouted, taking the stairs 2 at a time. William followed close behind. They found Margaret's bedroom door open, the room beyond in disarray. The windows had been shattered, glass littering the floor. Margaret lay on the bed, her nightgown splattered with blood, her hands pressed to her face. Around her fluttered dozens of crows, their black feathers catching the lamplight, their beaks red and wet. Charlotte and Thomas huddled in the corner of the room, Charlotte shielding her younger brother with her body. Mr. Finch stood before them, swinging a fire poker at the birds that swooped and dived with unnatural determination. "Father!" Charlotte cried when she saw Elijah. "They came for Mother's eyes. They tried to take them while she slept." Elijah rushed to the bed, batting away crows with his arms. "Margaret, Margaret, look at me." Slowly, Margaret lowered her hands. Her face was scratched and bleeding, but her eyes, her blue eyes, were intact, wide with terror, but still there. "Get out!" Elijah roared at the birds. "She is not yours to take. The covenant stands." To William's astonishment, the crows seemed to respond to his father's words. They circled the room once more, then streamed out through the broken windows into the night, leaving behind only feathers and the metallic smell of blood. In the sudden silence, Margaret began to sob, deep, racking sounds that shook her entire body. Elijah gathered her in his arms, murmuring reassurances while casting anxious glances at the windows. Mr. Finch helped Charlotte and Thomas to their feet. "What in God's name were those creatures?" the tutor asked, his scholarly composure shattered. "They were not natural birds," William said, the truth dawning on him with horrible clarity. "They were messengers from the entity." Elijah shot him a warning look, but William continued. "The covenant is weakening, isn't it, Father? The entity is growing impatient. It's no longer content to wait for our deaths." "What covenant?" Mr. Finch asked. "What are you talking about?" "Leave us," Elijah ordered. "Take the children downstairs. Send for Dr. Montgomery." But Charlotte stood her ground. "No, Father. We deserve to know what's happening. Those birds came for Mother's eyes, just like..." She hesitated. "Just like what happens to us after we die," William finished. "Our eyes disappear, taken by the entity that great-grandfather made a bargain with." Thomas looked up, his young face pale with fear. "Is that true? Is that why we never see grandfather's face in his coffin?" Margaret's sobs quieted. She pulled away from Elijah, her bloodied face set in an expression of grim resolve. "Tell them, Elijah. Tell them everything. No more secrets. The time for hiding the truth is past." For a moment, it seemed Elijah would refuse. Then his shoulders sagged, and he nodded slowly. "Yes, you're right. Gather everyone in the parlor. It's time the entire family understood what it means to bear the hollow name." The hours that followed were filled with revelations. Elijah explained the covenant to the assembled family and Mr. Finch, who insisted on staying despite the danger. He showed them the book with its unsettling illustrations and the box containing the preserved eyes of their ancestors. He described the ritual he performed each full moon to appease the entity's hunger. "But something has changed," he concluded. "The attack tonight suggests that the entity is no longer satisfied with our traditional offering. Perhaps it's because there have been no recent deaths," Mr. Finch suggested, his academic curiosity seemingly overriding his fear. "You said the last hollow to die before your father was your Uncle Frederick 7 years ago. Perhaps the entity's hunger has grown too great in the interim. Or perhaps," William said, "someone has interfered with the covenant." All eyes turned to him. "What do you mean?" Elijah demanded. William hesitated, then reached into his pocket and withdrew the parchment he had secretly taken from the box of eyes. "I found this, the original covenant document signed by Ezekiel Hollow. I've been studying it, trying to understand if there's a way to break the bargain without triggering the penalty." Elijah lunged for the document, but William stepped back. "No, Father, this concerns all of us. We all deserve to seek a solution." "There is no solution," Elijah shouted. "The covenant is binding until the last hollow dies. Unless," Mr. Finch said quietly, "there's a loophole in the original agreement." "Exactly," William nodded. "The document states that upon death, our eyes shall feed its hunger for witnessing the mortal realm. But what if we offered it sight without death? What if we found a way to let it see through our eyes while we live?" Margaret gasped. "You can't mean to invite this thing into your body." "Not exactly," William said, "but there might be a way to create a window, a controlled aperture through which it could witness our world without claiming lives or eyes." Mr. Finch nodded slowly. "Fascinating. A metaphysical compromise, if you will. But how would such a thing be accomplished?" "The book," William said. "It must contain more information than just the ritual for establishing the covenant. If great-grandfather found instructions for contacting the entity, there might be other rituals as well." Elijah shook his head. "This is madness. We cannot negotiate with this entity. We can only honor the terms as they were established. While it takes more and more eyes, Charlotte challenged. First birds, then strays, now an attempt on Mother. Who will be next? Thomas, me, you? We cannot live in fear, waiting for it to come in the night. Before Elijah could respond, a servant burst into the parlor. Sir, riders approaching from town. A large group with torches. Elijah rushed to the window. In the distance, moving up the long drive to Hollow Estate, was a procession of men on horseback, their torches creating a sinuous line of fire in the darkness. Who would come at this hour? Margaret asked, joining her husband at the window. Not friends, Elijah said grimly. Not with torches. William peered out. At the head of the procession, he could make out the figure of Solomon Carter, the old shopkeeper who had spoken of Ezekiel's strange book at Thaddeus's wake. It's Solomon, he said, and it looks like half the men from Millfield are with him. They know, Charlotte whispered. Somehow they know about the covenant. Elijah turned from the window, his face set in grim determination. William, take the book and the box of eyes. Hide them in the priest hole behind the dining room hearth. Mr. Finch, get the children to the root cellar. Margaret, clean yourself up as best you can. We must present a united front. As the family scattered to their tasks, Elijah grabbed William's arm. This is what comes of prying into secrets, boy. You've weakened the covenant with your questions and doubts, and now we face a mob. William pulled free of his father's grip. No, father. This comes from 3 generations of hidden bargains and paying with our ancestors' eyes. Truth will out, eventually, always. The pounding at the front door began before William could reach the dining room with his precious cargo. He heard his father's voice, steady and authoritative, as he greeted the late-night visitors. Solomon's reedy tones responded, too low for William to make out the words. William quickly located the hidden panel beside the dining room fireplace and pressed the concealed spring that caused it to slide open. The priest hole beyond was small, barely large enough for a man to hide in, a relic from days when Catholic clergy had needed to evade persecution. He placed the book and box inside, then hesitated. If the mob searched the house, they would likely find this hiding place, and if they discovered the evidence of the covenant, William shuddered to think what might happen to his family. Making a swift decision, he removed the covenant document from the box and tucked it inside his shirt. Then he closed the panel and hurried back toward the entrance hall. He arrived to find the situation already deteriorating. Solomon Carter stood in the center of the hall, surrounded by 24 grim-faced men from town. Some held torches, others carried rifles or shotguns. All wore expressions of mingled fear and disgust. We know what happens to hollow eyes after death, Solomon was saying. We've known for generations, but we were too afraid to act. But now it's taking more than just the dead. Isn't it, Elijah? I don't know what you're talking about, Elijah replied, his voice steady despite the danger. Don't lie, shouted one of the men, a burly blacksmith named Hoskins. My hunting dogs were found this morning, their eyes clean gone, and the Jenkins boy saw crows attacking a family of deer in the north pasture, going straight for the eyes they were. And what is this to do with my family? Elijah demanded. Solomon stepped forward. 3 generations of Hollows have practiced dark arts on this land. 3 generations have made unholy bargains for their prosperity while the rest of us struggle with honest toil. We've been patient. We've looked away, but no more. You have no proof of these wild accusations, Elijah said. We have proof enough, Solomon replied. Jacob Turner here, he gestured to a thin, nervous-looking man near the back of the group, was once employed by your father to dig graves. He tells us that after every Hollow funeral, once the mourners had gone, your father would dig up the coffin, and Dr. Montgomery would perform some procedure on the corpse. A murmur ran through the assembled men. William, watching from the doorway to the dining room, felt his heart sink. The mob had come with their minds already made up. There would be no reasoning with them. Furthermore, Solomon continued, we know about the book, the one with strange writing and pictures of eyes. The one Ezekiel brought with him when he came here with nothing and somehow built all this. He swept his arm to indicate the grandeur of Hollow Estate. You've been spying on my family, Elijah accused. Protecting our own, Solomon corrected. And now, with livestock and wild creatures being found eyeless all over the county, we mean to put an end to whatever dark forces you've unleashed. What do you intend to do? Margaret asked, stepping forward to stand beside her husband. She had washed the blood from her face, but scratches still marked her cheeks and forehead. Solomon's eyes narrowed at the sight of her injuries. What happened to you, Mrs. Hollow? I fell, Margaret said. In the darkness. Strange injuries for a fall, Solomon observed. Almost looks like something tried to claw at your eyes. Before Margaret could respond, a commotion erupted from the back of the house. Shouts and the sound of breaking glass, followed by a high, terrified scream that William recognized immediately. Thomas, he cried, pushing past his parents and the startled mob to race toward the kitchen. He found the trapdoor to the root cellar open, lantern light spilling up from below. Descending the steps, he discovered Mr. Finch unconscious on the earthen floor, blood trickling from a wound on his temple. Charlotte was backed into a corner, holding a kitchen knife, while Thomas was on his knees in the center of the cellar, surrounded by crows that had somehow found their way inside. Unlike the attack on Margaret, these birds were not frenzied. They moved with eerie precision, methodically pecking at the boy's face as he screamed and tried to shield himself with his arms. Get away from him, William shouted, grabbing a broom and swinging it wildly at the birds. The crows scattered momentarily, then regrouped, their attention now divided between Thomas and William. Their eyes gleamed with an intelligence that no natural bird should possess. William, Charlotte called, her voice shaking. They're not normal birds. They want his eyes. They keep going for his eyes. William continued swinging the broom, creating space for him to reach Thomas. The boy was sobbing, blood streaming from dozens of small cuts on his face, but his eyes were still intact. Come on, William said, pulling Thomas to his feet. We need to get out of here. As they retreated toward the steps, the crows began to circle more aggressively. One dove at William's face, its beak narrowly missing his eye. Another tangled in his hair, claws scratching at his scalp. The book, Charlotte cried. They must be servants of the entity. Maybe the book can control them. It's in the priest hole behind the dining room hearth. William gasped, batting away another crow. Charlotte nodded and dashed up the steps, the knife still clutched in her hand. William followed more slowly, supporting Thomas while the crows continued their assault. They emerged into a scene of chaos. The mob from town had spread throughout the house, searching rooms, overturning furniture, tearing down curtains and paintings. Elijah and Margaret were nowhere to be seen. Father, William called. Mother, a gunshot answered him, coming from the direction of the dining room. William's blood ran cold. He pushed Thomas toward the nearest servant, Mrs. Simmons, the housekeeper, who stood trembling in the hallway. Take him upstairs, William ordered. Barricade yourselves in a bedroom. Then he ran toward the sound of the shot. The dining room was in disarray, chairs overturned, the long table shoved against a wall. Charlotte stood by the fireplace, frantically pressing the panel that would open the priest hole. Solomon Carter and 3 other men faced Elijah, who held a dueling pistol that had belonged to his father. Step away from my daughter, Elijah commanded, the smoking gun steady in his hand. At his feet lay one of the townsmen, clutching his shoulder where Elijah's bullet had struck him. Not until we have the book, Solomon said. We know it's hidden somewhere in this room. There is no book, Elijah insisted. Only the ravings of superstitious old men. William stepped into the room. Father, all eyes turned to him. William, get your sister and go, Elijah ordered. Instead, William reached into his shirt and withdrew the covenant document. Looking for this? He asked Solomon. The old man's rheumy eyes widened. That's it, the contract Ezekiel made with the devil. Not the devil, William corrected. Something older. something that hungers for sight. William, no, Elijah shouted, but William had made his decision. He unfolded the parchment and held it toward the nearest candle. If this burns, the covenant is broken. The entity can no longer claim our eyes after death, and it will take them in life instead. All of us blinded in an instant, Elijah cried. Solomon and his men backed away, suddenly uncertain. What does he mean? One of them asked. He means, Charlotte said, finally succeeding in opening the hidden panel, that our family made a bargain, our eyes after death in exchange for prosperity in life. If we break the covenant, the price is blindness for all living hollows. She withdrew the book and box from the priest hole. The sight of these objects sent a visible shudder through the townsmen. Witchcraft, Solomon whispered, just as we feared. Not witchcraft, William said. A bargain, a covenant with an entity that exists beyond our world, that craves the ability to see our realm. And now it's growing stronger, Charlotte added. Hungrier. It's no longer content to wait for our deaths. It's sending its servants, the crows, to collect eyes from the living. As if summoned by her words, a sound became audible from outside. The beating of hundreds of wings, the cawing of countless crows. The men moved to the windows to see the night sky darkened by a swarm of birds descending on Hollow Estate. It's coming, Elijah said, his voice hollow. The entity itself is coming. In that moment, with terror mounting in the room, William had a moment of clarity. He looked at the covenant document in his hands, at the book Charlotte held, at the box containing generations of hollow eyes. There's another way, he said. A compromise. What do you mean? Solomon asked, his anger momentarily overtaken by fear of the gathering darkness outside. William took the book from Charlotte and quickly leafed through its pages until he found what he was looking for. An illustration showing a circle of figures around a central eye symbol, their hands extended and offering. The entity craves sight, William explained, but not just any sight, human sight. The ability to witness our world through our eyes. What if we offered it that? A window through which it could see without taking eyes in death or life. Elijah stared at his son. How? A ritual similar to the one great-grandfather performed, but with different intent. Not a bargain for prosperity, but a sharing of sight. We create a vessel, a seeing stone or mirror, through which the entity can witness our world. Outside, the crows had begun to hurl themselves against the windows and doors of the house. Glass shattered in distant rooms, followed by screams as the birds gained entry. There's no time for new rituals, Solomon said. Those devils will be upon us any moment. Then help us, William urged. All of you. The more witnesses to the ritual, the stronger it will be. The townsmen looked to Solomon, who hesitated, then nodded grimly. Better to try this boy's mad plan than be pecked to death by those unnatural birds. Working quickly, William directed the men to arrange the dining table back in the center of the room. On it, he placed the book, open to the page with the ritual illustration. Around the table, he positioned Elijah, Charlotte, Solomon, and several of the townsmen. We need something to serve as the vessel, William said. Something that can hold an image, reflect light. A mirror, Charlotte suggested. Too fragile. William shook his head. It needs to be something durable, something that won't break easily. What about this? One of the townsmen held up a smooth, polished piece of obsidian, a paperweight from Elijah's desk. My grandfather found this on his farm, he said it was an Indian seeing stone. William took the black stone. It was roughly oval, about the size of his palm, its surface glossy enough to reflect candlelight. This will work. Everyone, join hands around the table. As they formed the circle, the assault on the house intensified. The crows' cawing had risen to a deafening chorus, and from upstairs came the sound of Thomas screaming again. Hurry, Elijah urged. William placed the obsidian in the center of the table, directly on the open book. Then, following instinct and fragments of knowledge gleaned from the text, he began to speak in a clear, firm voice. Entity beyond the veil, watcher, hunger, eyeless one, we offer you a new covenant. No longer shall you claim our eyes in death. No longer shall you threaten to take sight in life. Instead, we offer you this vessel, this window into our world." He pricked his finger with a knife and let 3 drops of blood fall onto the obsidian. "With blood freely given, not taken, we create this aperture. Through it, you may witness our realm for as long as it endures." The others around the table followed suit, each adding a drop of blood to the stone, which began to absorb the crimson liquid like a sponge. As the last person, Solomon, added his blood, the obsidian began to glow with an inner light. The crows outside fell suddenly silent. The entire house seemed to hold its breath. Then, from the stone, a voice emerged, not heard with ears, but felt in the mind. A voice ancient and hungry and cold as the space between stars. "You offer a window instead of eyes, a glimpse instead of possession." William swallowed hard but continued. "We do. A permanent window through which you may witness our world at all times. In return, you release the Hollow family from the original covenant. No more eyes taken in death, no blindness inflicted in life." There was a long, terrible silence. Then, "The hunger remains. The need to see remains. And you will see," William insisted, "through this stone, through any who willingly gaze into it. But you will take nothing that is not freely offered." Another silence, longer this time. The obsidian's glow intensified, casting strange shadows across the faces of those gathered around the table. Finally, the old covenant is dissolved. The new stands. The window opens. With those words, the obsidian flared with blinding light. Everyone around the table instinctively looked away, everyone except William, who found himself unable to turn from the stone's radiance. In that moment of connection, he felt the entity's presence. Vast, ancient, lonely, a being from beyond the veil of reality, able to perceive other realms but not to enter them, forever hungry for the experience of worlds it could sense but never touch. The light faded, leaving the obsidian looking ordinary once more, except for a faint pulsing glow at its center, like a pupil dilating and contracting as it adjusted to changing light. Outside, the crows had begun to disperse, flying away from Hollow Estate in all directions. The unnatural silence lifted, replaced by the normal sounds of a Kentucky night. Crickets, distant owls, the whisper of wind through trees. "Is it done?" Charlotte whispered. "Is the covenant truly broken?" "Yes," William said, his voice strange to his own ears. "The old covenant is dissolved. The new one stands." "And the prosperity?" Elijah asked. "Will our crops still thrive? Our livestock still flourish?" William shook his head. "The land will yield what honest labor coaxes from it, no more. We are free of the bargain, Father. Free to succeed or fail by our own efforts like any other family." Solomon Carter looked from William to the obsidian stone, his expression troubled. "And this thing will watch us through that stone forever?" "It will witness," William corrected. "Not just us, but all who come here, all who pass by. Craves the experience of our world, nothing more. And now it has a window rather than stolen glimpses through dead eyes." The townsmen began to back away from the table, suddenly eager to be away from Hollow Estate and its strange occupants. Solomon lingered, studying William with new respect and perhaps a touch of fear. "You've done a remarkable thing tonight, young man," the old shopkeeper said. "Whether it's a blessing or a curse, only time will tell." As the mob departed, their torches receding down the long drive, the Hollow family gathered in the ravaged dining room. Margaret brought Thomas down from upstairs, his face bandaged, but his eyes, his bright blue eyes, intact and alert. "What happens now?" Charlotte asked, looking around at the destruction. Elijah sighed, suddenly looking older than his years. "We rebuild. We learn to farm without supernatural assistance. We become an ordinary family." "Not quite ordinary," William said, his gaze drawn to the obsidian stone still lying on the table. "We will always be the family that harbors a window to another realm, the keepers of the entity's eye. Better that than collectors of our ancestors' eyes," Margaret said firmly. She picked up the box that had contained generations of hollow eyes, now empty. These should be properly buried with prayers and dignity. William nodded, but his attention remained on the stone. He could feel it watching not just him but everything around it. And, strangest of all, he felt no fear, only a profound understanding that some barriers between worlds were meant to have windows, not walls. In the days that followed, the Hollow family buried the box of eyes beneath the ancient oak tree where generations of their ancestors lay. They burned the book with its strange symbols and unsettling illustrations. They repaired the damage to their home and began the harder work of repairing their reputation in the community. The spring planting revealed the truth of their new circumstances. Hollow tobacco grew no faster, no taller, no more abundantly than that of neighboring farms. For the first time in 3 generations, the family faced the prospect of an ordinary harvest, subject to the vagaries of weather and pests like everyone else. But there were compensations. No more crows attacked livestock or wild creatures on Hollow land. No more strays were found eyeless at the edges of the property. And when old Mr. Finch passed away peacefully in his sleep that summer, his body remained intact, his eyes still in their sockets when he was laid to rest. The obsidian stone remained in the Hollow house, kept on a small table in the parlor. Visitors often remarked on its unusual beauty, on the way it seemed to catch the light even in a darkened room. Few noticed how it sometimes pulsed with an inner glow, how it always seemed to be positioned to witness the comings and goings of the household. And if William sometimes caught himself speaking to it in quiet moments, sharing the small events of daily life with the entity beyond the veil, no one commented on it. After all, every family has its peculiarities, its private rituals, its secrets kept in plain sight. The Hollows continued to be known for their prosperity, though now it came from innovation rather than supernatural favor. William, with his keen mind and education, introduced new farming techniques and crop rotations that gradually restored their yields. Charlotte married the son of a Louisville tobacco merchant, creating advantageous business connections. Even young Thomas found his calling as a skilled horse breeder, his gentle way with animals bringing a new source of income to the estate. As for Elijah and Margaret, they gradually reconciled themselves to their new position, respected but no longer feared, prosperous but no longer mysteriously blessed. And if Elijah sometimes stood at the edge of his fields, looking out over crops that grew only as tall and green as his labor warranted, perhaps only the obsidian stone witnessed his occasional sighs of regret. Years passed. The Civil War came and went, touching the Hollows as it touched all Kentucky families, dividing loyalties and testing bonds. Through it all, the obsidian stone watched, its pupil-like center dilating and contracting as it witnessed joy and sorrow, birth and death, the endless cycle of human experience. When William, in his old age, was asked about the strange events of that night in 1850, he would only say that some bargains can be renegotiated, some covenants rewritten, that sometimes offering a window is better than giving up your eyes. And if, on certain nights when the moon is dark and the wind whispers through the ancient oaks, visitors to what remains of Hollow Estate claim to see a faint glow coming from the ruins of the old house, well, that's just another Kentucky ghost story. Another tale for the ghastly journal. Or perhaps it's something watching, still watching after all these years, gazing through its window into a world it can witness but never join, content with its view of the living from behind the veil. Remember, when you look into the darkness, sometimes the darkness looks back. But the Hollows learned that offering it a proper window is far better than having it take your eyes. Sleep well, and perhaps, if you're curious, keep an eye out for small polished stones that seem to catch the light even on the darkest nights. For the entity is always hungry for new vistas, new witnesses, new windows through which to gaze upon our world. And the Hollow Covenant, some say, continues to this day, binding not a family to prosperity, but an ancient being to a single black stone. A fair exchange that allows both worlds to exist in harmony, separated by a membrane as thin as an eyelid, as reflective as obsidian. Just remember, if you find such a stone, if you feel it watching you, don't be afraid. The entity doesn't want your eyes anymore. It just wants to see.